We're delighted to welcome everybody to this Psychological Capital webinar in collaboration, of course, with the Leinster Society. We're always delighted to collaborate with them, and the Thrive Wellbeing Hub here at the Institute. So my name is Dee France, and myself and the team here look after all things wellness at the Institute. Thrive, for those of you that don't know, provides a variety of wellbeing supports to our members and, of course, our students, including but not limited to a confidential listening service, counselling with a professional therapist, wellness coaching, and webinars and events such as this. So I invite you to check our our Thrive Wellbeing Hub for the latest content and, of course, for support. So if something comes up for you today, that's where you can go to get some support from ourselves. So as I said, we're very grateful to the Leinster Society for collaborating with us on this event, and I'd like to introduce you to their chair, their current chair, Damien Carr. So I'll hand over to you, Damien. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Dee, and hi everyone. So yeah, look, we're delighted to be able to do this with Thrive for this session. The Leinster Society obviously caters to the needs of the members within the Leinster region, and we hold a number of in-person and virtual events throughout the year with specific topics covered in webinars every couple of months, and the idea there is really just to provide as much outreach to our members as possible and to try to provide them with the practical, emotional, or other support that they can utilize as part of their day-to-day jobs, and that's one of the reasons that we have been so glad to collaborate with Thrive today for this event. So with that, I think we're all very excited to hear what Jen has to say. So I'll hand over to her, and thank you everyone for joining.
Great. So thank you so much, Damien. Just before we hand over to Jen, I want to just give her a quick introduction. So delighted to welcome our speaker, Jen Martin. So Jen is a psychological coach and a vulnerability researcher. She works globally with businesses, government and sporting leaders to enhance psychological well-being, connection and performance. Ireland's expert on vulnerability, Jen also advises on mental health initiatives and specialises in psychological safety and imposter phenomenon. So Jen, before we start, I'm sure our audience, I know I've had some questions about this before we started, but I think our audience would be very interested to know a little bit more about your current PhD research on vulnerability. So if you want to just give us a tiny little taster of that, and then you can get into the main event. Thanks very much. Over to you.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Dee. Yeah, thanks, Dee, and thanks, Damien, for the introduction. I mean, it's funny to hear imposter in my bio because it is something that I'm very interested in. But I feel like I'm an imposter even when I hear that. I don't know if anyone else has that experience. But yeah, I am conducting my PhD at the moment on vulnerability. It's such a huge area. There's so much. I mean, it's not the subject of today's webinar at all. But please feel free to reach out if you have particular questions. But just in a nutshell, some of the things that interest me and that I'm keen to look at is I'm particularly interested in what stops people from expressing vulnerability. And when I say vulnerability, I mean psychological, relational vulnerability with other people. So I'm really interested in what gets in the way, what hinders, but also what helps people be willing to express that vulnerability. I'm also interested in gender. So I'm particularly curious about the gender dynamics. So do we see gender differences in vulnerability, to pick out both male and female genders, because it's very nascent research. So those are the genders that we look at. Yeah, I suppose I have curiosity there around, are women more or less likely to express vulnerability and what's going on there? So there's a curiosity there that I have. Linked to that, also interested in the context. So does context play a role? Are we more or less willing to be vulnerable in certain personal contexts, in certain professional contexts, in the presence of certain people, and so on and so forth? And then, of course, finally, the output of vulnerability. So I'm interested in how does vulnerability play a role in our well-being? I would hypothesize that yes, and does vulnerability impact our performance levels? So essentially, are people who are more willing to express vulnerability, are they higher performers? Do we see that output in terms of their performance and productivity in work and life and so on and so forth? So there's so much there, but those are the curiosities that I have around vulnerability and what I'm looking at. A subject for another day. And today we're here to talk about thriving under pressure and looking at psychological capital, another really, really interesting area of research. So I'm going to kick off with a Menti, if that's okay. So you all thought you were here having a nice lunch break off, just to sit back and listen, but I'm going to make you do a little bit of work, if you don't mind. So I'm going to share Menti. Hopefully you can see that. So you might give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, or come on sound. Let me know if you can't see it. Brilliant. Yeah, so I can see someone's giving me a high five. Thanks, Dee. So a few questions. So these are just a quick fire, just to kick us off, just to see, are we all on the same page? What are we thinking? Are we all thinking something different around this term and some of the topics that I'm going to cover today? So if I can ask you to go to menti.com on a separate browser, on your computer and your phone. And so menti.com, MENTI.com, and use the code 78222021. So the code is on my screen. Okay, so I'm just waiting to see if some of you join the Menti. Great. Okay. So we have one person in at the moment. So I'm hoping that we can get a few more because I know there's quite a lot of us on the call. And please feel free to put in as many terms as you can. So when you hear the term psychological capital, so even if you know nothing about the concept from a literature perspective or a research perspective, academic perspective, what do you think of when you hear that word? Great, so we have some answers coming in there. So mental strength, resilience, lots of resilience in there. Awareness, energy, mind, brilliant. Endurance, another great word. Capacity, love that. Balance, state of mind or strength of mind, excuse me. Confidence, mental strength, emotional intelligence, health. Okay, they're all popping in now. Brilliant. So this is going to be a quick fire round of questions. I know there's 300 of you and I'm seeing the number going up and up and up, which is brilliant. But I am going to move quite quickly through these questions just so we can get into the meat of the slide deck. Brilliant. Okay. And I should say at the very outset, I'm happy to share a slide deck with you at the end. And also I'm happy to share a PDF of the results of the questions, because I think sometimes it's quite interesting to see what people think. Okay, so lots of great words there for what you think when you hear the term psychological capital. Brilliant. And we're going to deep dive into that in a little while. So I'm going to move on to the next question. Some of them should be quite light touch. So do you take care? Do you take active care of your psychological well-being? So completely anonymous, you can be as honest as you want. And if nothing else, what I love about webinars like this that Dee and the team have organized is it's a moment of pause. It's a moment for you to check in with yourself and actually ask yourself a few questions. So do you take active care of your well-being? Brilliant. So there's lots of answers coming in, and I'm conscious, I know that not everybody will have jumped into the Menti to ask the question, so that's okay. Okay, so we've lots of people taking care, lots of people not sure. I suppose hopefully today might shed some light. We can maybe look at some actions that you can take, some simple steps. And some very honest people saying no, and that's okay. But you're at this webinar, so I will say you've taken one step to take care of your psychological well-being. So that's good. Great. Okay, we'll click on to the next question. This is a curiosity of mine. Do you journal? Do you have a reflection practice? And that can look like anything. So don't be put off by the word journal. So do you go out for a walk and ask yourself some questions? Do you go out for a walk and reflect on the week past or the month past or whatever it might be? Do you have some sort of practice that allows you to touch base with yourself and have a moment of psychological self-care that looks like a reflection or a journaling practice? Okay, the vast majority, no, absolutely fine. Hopefully we can have a little look at that today. Some people saying not sure, don't know. I totally relate to that. I think the word journaling can sometimes be a little bit up in the air and sometimes can be a little bit intimidating. I'm not sure, I'm supposing, but we can talk about that. Brilliant. Another little question here. Do you have a clear idea of what is your best self? So we hear this term all the time, my best self, my best life. But my curiosity is around your definition of what that looks like for you and what's your best. So when you are looking and feeling and thinking as your best self, what does that look like? So do you have a clear idea of what that is? Okay, so that's a mix across the board, I would say there. And I have a lovely exercise that I'm going to share with you. We might get time to it in the slide deck today in the presentation. And if not, I've prepared it as a document form for you, so you can take it away. Brilliant. Thank you for the honesty. I think it's very honest of you to say, no, I don't know what that looks like. And that alone is a reflection that you can take away with you, that you might be driving home from work today and saying, what is my best self? And that alone, asking that question, can actually move the dial. So that's great. Okay, so lots of us on the call. I'm sure there's multiple nationalities, different contexts that you come from. I'd love to know, what is one of your strengths? So we don't, I suppose I'm speaking from my Irish context. I certainly wasn't all that familiar talking about my strengths. It's something that I've leaned into with the work that I do. But I'd love to know, what is one of your strengths? And it can be anything across the board, anything at all. So it might be a characteristic, it might be a trait that you have, it might be a skill that you have, you might be an Excel whiz, whatever it might be. But what is one of your strengths? Okay, lovely ones coming in here. Creativity, empathy, hard work, open-mindedness, communication, good listener, curious, loyalty, integrity. There's lovely. I love when I see the mix of character strengths and skills. That's lovely. Humor, very important. Intelligent, impartiality, really great. Responsible, grit. That's another popular word in popular psychology now. Optimism, determined, good leader, always finding the bright sides, common sense, love it. And so there's lovely ones coming in there. Brilliant. So I'm just going to stay on this for 10, 20 seconds more, because I want to give you the chance to actually ask yourself that question. What is one of your strengths? So we've 79 responses so far. That is not bad at all. Okay, brilliant. Let's move on to the next question. So I asked you earlier about the journaling practice, and I asked you earlier about, do you take an active role in your well-being? So I'd love to know what holds you back. Now, I've just put a couple of options there, really. And of course, could be a plethora of reasons that you don't actively take care of your well-being. And that is okay. There is no judgment in this space. This is a moment of you to actually take stock. So what gets in your way? So time, big one here. Yeah. Time, lack of resources, don't know where to start. That's really, really honest. And others. So again, we can have a chat at the end of the presentation today, and maybe we can chat about that. So I'm always curious to know, what is the other, because of course there could be lots of different things happening there. So lack of time, it's a big one, isn't it? And I mean, we could slice and dice that different ways. We could say lack of time, we could say perceived lack of time, but I absolutely don't want to say that and for that to seem like a judgment, because we're all juggling, aren't we? So that's something that maybe we can look at as well today, hopefully. Brilliant. Okay. So what is one thing that you need to do or change to help you thrive? So again, this is a moment to take stock. Maybe you haven't asked yourself this question in quite a while. I come from a coaching psychology background, and the number one principle in coaching psychology and in our code of ethics is the client is resourceful. So if we go on to our Psychological Society code of ethics, that's number one. The client is resourceful. So what that really says is we know those answers inside of ourselves. Maybe we're disconnected. Maybe we can't get to that answer. Maybe it's a bit blurry. Maybe we haven't created time or space to get to that answer, but we do have inklings, and we do have an innate wisdom. We do have that gut feeling, that second brain feeling. So what's one thing that you need to change? So let's have a look what's coming in there. So saying no is a big one there. So multiple people, I think, have said that, if that's coming in so big there. Big picture, being true to yourself, eliminate procrastination. I can really relate to that, very honest. Giving myself a break. Yeah, you're doing better than you think you are. Going easier on myself, stopping for a minute. So just taking those micro pauses can be really, really effective. Standing up for my own needs, making the effort to go out. I think that's a really honest one. Sometimes we just want to come home and just switch off. committing to it, delegating, letting go. So there's loads. Again, I'm going to share this with you so that you can be inspired by other people's answers, because I think there's lots of good things in here. And also real practical things: get more sleep. Really nice things there. Time management, learning to switch off, communicate better, physical environment, slow down, reflect. Oh, there's loads. As I said, I'm going to share this with you because I think it's quite inspiring to see other people's answers. So there's something that can start provoking a thought for an action step for those of you, or for those of us who say, maybe I could take better active care of my well-being. Maybe this is the place to start. And if today gives you nothing more than a kind of a catalyst, then I'm happy to be that catalyst. Brilliant. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And are you all still with me? Brilliant. I'm going to share my slide deck now. Sound is on. There we go. Thanks to Chris for changing the game with that recommendation. Play from the start. Okay, so we can skip over these because we've already had an introduction. We've already kicked off with our Mentimeter. And we've already had our introduction to the title. So today is really all about thriving under pressure, and looking at psychological in particular as a way to do that. So the context, a little bit about me. So Dee already gave me a thorough introduction, but I suppose it's always nice to be able to introduce yourself. So I am conducting my PhD. My research is around vulnerability. It's something that's really important to me from my working professional background, though it's not the subject of today's discussion. Happy to answer any questions if you have later. But when I tell people that I research vulnerability, very often I get kind of faces like this. People are, or they are really not enamored, and they kind of want to get away from me because they go, oh God, that sounds really uncomfortable. Okay, hopefully you can all hear me. But the professional context and why that brought me to the work that I do now is I've worked with lots of amazing people from lots of different organizations, both corporate, as you can see there on the left-hand side, and also more and more now in the sporting context. And I think that's really people's curiosity around vulnerability coming to the fore. But why that's important and why I share this is I have had the privilege of working with lots of different people and seeing lots of people thrive, and people right across the board in terms of where they sit within the organization and the type of work they do. So thriving is something that's really important to me in lots of different contexts, and hopefully I'll be able to bring that to you today. So when we talk about thriving in research, there's lots of different words. If we look up a basic definition in any dictionary online or whatever: growth, prospering, doing well, developing, flourishing. There's lots of different ways that we talk about thriving. But when we talk about it from a psychology perspective, we really look at that last word there, flourishing. So we kind of equate the word thriving and flourishing. And just to pull out a definition, and I promise it's not going to be a very academic webinar for you today. Flourishing is defined in the research as when people experience positive emotions, positive psychological functioning, and positive social functioning most of the time. And I love that definition just at a human level, to be honest, because I think there's so much myth and miscommunication around the concept of toxic positivity. Some of it can become very toxic. So I love that. We're not always supposed to be positive. We don't always have to have it all together. But most of the time, people are flourishing when they're experiencing positive emotion, positive psychological functioning, and social functioning most of the time. So that takes the pressure. It's quite a compassionate definition. So why is that important, and why do I include that just as our starting point for the subject matter today? Is to show you that when we are talking about our psychological health and when we are talking about our psychological well-being, really the angle that I'm coming at it from is a salutogenic approach. So for anybody who reads in this area, and I'm sure there's plenty of you who are interested in this because it's quite an interesting subject matter, when we talk about psychology, it actually sits on a spectrum. So on the left-hand side there, you see traditional psychology, and on the right-hand side, positive psychology. So it's a newer psychological field, maybe I probably won't do it justice now, but saying how old, maybe 40 years old, so relatively new in terms of literature, but quite a lot of research has been done in that time frame. So traditional psychology focuses on what is wrong. And that's really important. So if something is wrong with us psychologically, say we're at a -10 or at a -6, the interventions and the work that we will do with psychologists who take care of the traditional psychology, the goal here is to get us to neutral, because neutral is functioning. And that's really, really important. In contrast, and not only in contrast, but in complement, positive psychology asks, well, what are we doing right? What's working well? And how can we do more of that? So if I'm operating at a 4, +4, great. So things are obviously working. So how can I do more of that? What can I add in? What can I adapt to function even better? How can I go from a 4 to a 6, and so on and so forth? So with positive psychology and with this work, and in particular with psychological capital, which we're looking at today, we are looking from a strengths-based approach, a salutogenic approach, not a pathogenic approach, although that's very important, and both should work in tandem and hand in hand. They shouldn't replace each other at all. So this is probably the only wordy heavy slide that I have, I promise you. But I just wanted to put all these down just to show the different well-being models that we have. And there's more out there, but these are kind of the most robust academic well-being models that we have. The only reason that I put them all there is to show you one thing, that irrespective of which model you feel most drawn to, there's a key element, and the key element in all of these things is action. So action really is what moves the dial up, what moves the dial from where we are to where we want to go. So when we talk about those actions, when we talk about those goals, for me, the metaphor that I want to leave you with today, that I want to develop with you today, is the idea that our actions and our goals are really only as good as the soil, and by soil here, I mean the psychological soil that we plant them in. So we can set all the goals we want, and I'm, of course, a big fan of goal setting, but it's only part of the picture. We really have to be taking care and cultivating that psychological soil as well, so that when we plant those seeds being those goals, those seeds can thrive and can flourish. So the way that I, in my work with my clients, talk about cultivating the psychological soil is that it has to be a holistic approach. We have to look back, we have to reflect, we have to extrapolate the lessons, we have to look forward, we have to have vision, we have to have goals, we have to know our values, and so we can create those goals in alignment so that we know the direction we're going, and we have to look inward. We have to have that moment of introspection. And if we have that three-pronged approach, looking back, looking forward, looking in, that is cultivating a healthy psychological soil for for our health, and for our goals to thrive. Okay, so speaking very fast, just because I know I've put a lot on the slide deck. How are we doing for time? Okay. If I go over, I do apologize. I'm already saying that. That's not a good thing. But I promise to get resources to you if we do have to cut anything short. So a few faces on the screen. Do we recognize them all? Anybody not recognized? So we have Oprah, we have Tim Ferriss, very famous author in the space, the self-development space. Aniston Gaga. Who else do we have there? I suppose the one that maybe people ask some of it. Yeah, I see some chats coming in there. So please feel free to. Okay, everything okay? Just checking the chat there. So Da Vinci is the middle one. So what do all of these people have in common? So I might actually ask you to put that in the chat. So just to see if you could find the common thread between all these people, because it's quite an array of people across different periods, different professions. So anybody hazard a guess? Creative, unique. Yep. I mean, those are all true. Absolutely true. Brilliant. Thanks, Patrice and Niamh. They all succeeded in opposition. Yeah, that's so true. Actually, I hadn't thought about that, but in that context, so that's true. Successful, absolutely. Positivity. I would hazard a guess that yes. I don't know them personally, but I would imagine. So there's probably lots of common threads that we can pull out, but one that I wanted to pull out today, and hopefully it might click or inspire you, is the fact that these are all people who have an active or had an active journaling practice. which came as a surprise to me when I was looking into this to kind of look at some faces to this kind of concept of journaling and looking back. So these people all have an active journaling practice. Now, lots of literature out there talks about habits, so habit stacking, and our goals are only as good as the habits and the systems that we put in place to support them. So we have that very famous quote, this idea that habits and systems are really, really important, but as too is the psychological soil, and a journaling practice, excuse me, will absolutely help that. So I want to talk about that. I would love to maybe do a little exercise with you around that, but I will acknowledge that it is uncomfortable. It is something that we like to avoid. This is quite often the work sometimes that I do with vulnerability clients, and we do want to avoid it. It's absolutely human nature, but it is really, really important. So I want to ask you guys if this is you when it comes to journaling or when it comes to doing the work. I'm going to play this. It's literally 10 seconds long.
I see you got your mustache back.
Well, my nose got lonely.
And you don't have a mustache, which is good. I'm Chandler. I make jokes when I'm uncomfortable.
Okay, so I suppose if I was in a room, I would ask you who is show of hands for who uses humor. Who of us uses humor to avoid those kind of uncomfortable feelings? I don't really want to journal. I don't really want to reflect because it is a little bit uncomfortable. So what is your strategy? Do you know what your strategy is to avoid it? And so that might be a question to ask yourself. But today we're going to put aside, if I can invite you to put aside the discomfort, and we're going to have a quick journaling practice. And I suppose it is, for me, all inspired by this quote. We do not learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience. And absolutely in the work that I do, this is the crux of the matter. We can do all the work we want, but unless we take that moment of pause to reflect back on that work, on that new experience that we do, we don't actually take the time to extrapolate the learning, the insight, and the lessons. So I have 7 questions for you, and we're going to do it as a kind of a quick fire reflection exercise. And then what I will do, well, I'll give you that second instruction in a moment. So 7 questions. We're going to do it a quick fire, as I said. And we're going to have a little pause to reflect before we jump into the next section of the webinar. Okay, so pen and paper, you can't beat putting pen to paper. If you must insist on opening a new Word document, that's absolutely fine, a new note on your phone. But I have to say, and there's quite a lot of research as well that talks about pen and paper and the power of it. You can't beat it. Okay, so 7 questions, fairly quick fire. So don't overthink it. Answer with your gut. So the first question is, what are you most proud of, particularly in the last 6 months? What are you most proud of? So again, nobody has to see these answers. These are for you. What are you most proud of, particularly in the last 6 months? Great. Second question. What specifically have I achieved or am I doing? What specifically have I achieved or am I doing? Again, we're kind of looking at that kind of 6-month time frame. And again, happy to share the slides, and I'll make sure that these questions are added into a slide for you. The third question is, in that time frame, what have I overcome? What have I overcome? What challenges have I faced and overcome? Brilliant. Great. Just keeping an eye on the chat there. Thank you for sharing. So there's people sharing in the chat as well. If you feel comfortable or called to do that, you're more than welcome to, but you're absolutely not obliged to do that. Whatever you feel comfortable with. The next question is, what specifically have I learned about myself so far this year? So we're well into April now. So what specifically have I learned about myself so far this year? Great. Again, I'm not lingering too long on these, just to kind of get that touch point with yourself. Quick reflection. Number 5, how is my life different as a result of the past 6 months? How is my life different as a result of the past 6 months? Great. Next question. What is a goal that I have wanted to achieve for some time? What is a goal that I have wanted to achieve for some time? And connected to that, although I appreciate it's a little bit early in the conversation today, but maybe just to start thinking about it, just to plant the seed in that soil, what is one small action that I could take today to move the dial on that? What is one small action that I could take today to move the dial on that? So thinking about those answers that you gave in the Menti at the start, thinking about those things that are getting in the way, thinking about those things that you acknowledged you would like to do, saying no, creating space, giving myself those micro moments, all of those lovely answers that you gave. Perhaps there's something in there that could be that one small action. What's one conversation you could have, one phone call, one no that you could say, one boundary that you could set, whatever it might be. So what is one small action that I could take today to move the dial on that goal that I've wanted to achieve for some time? So I appreciate that's a quick fire, but the beauty here is that's journaling. In fact, there's lots of different ways. There's no particular way to journal or not to journal. It's just to sit down and to try and touch base with yourself, asking yourself a question and pouring the answer out. Now, we just asked as question answer format, but a journaling practice might be simply taking one question and just putting everything that comes to your mind without judgment or restriction or calculating your thoughts or trying to make perfect wording, and just putting it on paper. You can burn it, you can cut it up, you can do whatever you want after, but that's essentially what journaling is. It's just that touch point with yourself. And so it comes back to that question. I'll go back a slide there. We do not learn from experience, but we learn from reflecting on experience. So how often, what can we commit to? Can I commit to 5 minutes asking myself a question at the end of the week? Can I commit to a reflective practice that's maybe going out for a walk? My personal reflective practice, I go through phases of pen to paper and journaling, but more often than not, I take voice notes. I go out walking and voice note, and I just talk. And it's just absolutely just emptying the mind. And often I find that you get little nuggets, little pieces of information that when you're not judging yourself and you're just speaking out loud. I will say the neighbors probably think I'm absolutely bonkers when I do that, when they see me talking. But your journaling practice can be yours. You can define what it can look like for you. So if you've never journaled, well, you've just done it now, albeit a very short form. But it's important because, as it says there on the slide, our past informs our present and our future. So journaling is about looking backwards and extrapolating from there. And now we're going to do a little bit of looking inward. We're looking at those goals. And, it's about acknowledging that those goals that we set, that we've up to 300 people on the call today, there will be a plethora of different goals across the board, both personal and professional, for our well-being, for our family, whatever it might be. So the goals are different. But my question to you is, where are you planting them? So we can be very good, particularly in January, September. Often we sit down and we write goals and we think about those things that we want and those actions, which is good and great. But what about that psychological soil? So that's what today is all about. Asking, is that soil fertile? And that brings me to psychological capital. So psychological capital here, as we see the definition on the slide, PsyCap, it's referred to in the literature also. PsyCap refers to an individual's positive psychological state of development. And this is not my concept. It's not a a phrase that I use. It's a term that was coined by a researcher called Fred Luthans. And it is an academic concept that we are going to talk about today. So psychological capital, really, for the concept of what we're talking about today, is the soil. It is the soil that you are planting your seeds in. For me, it's a really important thing to consider. We talk about social capital, human capital, we talk about financial capital, we talk about lots of different types of capital, but what about our psychological capital? What about that soil in which we conduct our lives? So a really, really important concept for us to consider today. And just to build it out a little bit more, if you look into the literature on this, it has 4 components. And those 4 components are hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism. So originally, when this concept was developed and coined by researchers who studied it, it was originally looked at in the concept of organizational psychology. So they were looking at people in work. But now it goes beyond that, where we can look at this concept in our day-to-day lives. Hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism. And it's not lost to me that the acronym for this is HERO. Hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism. And if we think back to one of the earlier slides where we talked about salutogenesis and taking a salutogenic approach, taking a strengths-based approach to our psychological well-being, this is absolutely that. Of course, we can't really talk about increasing or, we can't really focus on all of these nice extras if we are in the trenches and focused on our traditional areas of psychology that we need to get to neutral. So this is something that perhaps we look at when we want to move the dial, when we're taking a strengths-based approach. So there's lots that we can say about psychological capital, but I want to focus on 3 things today. So 3 pieces of good news, 3 kind of key points to share with you about psychological capital, or PsyCap. And the first question that we ask in research is, well, is it fixed? So is this a trait? So so this person has a tendency to have high psychological capital and this person low, or is it developable? Developable. Am I saying that correctly? I don't know how many times I've talked about this, but this word always catches me. So the good news is it is the latter. It is not fixed. It is developable. And that's because of neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity, for many of you will know about this. So for anyone who doesn't know, neuroplasticity essentially is the fact that our brains are malleable. And the way I like to think about it is, when we think a certain thought over and over and over and over again, we essentially create grooves, well-worn pathways, neural pathways, we call them, in our brain. And so it's like if we walk in a forest and we walk and walk and walk the same path, eventually the weeds will clear and the path will become clear. So it's kind of this concept. So we can move the dial on our psychological capital because it is developable. So that's good. The second thing, it's good. I should go back to that. It's good because otherwise, why would we be talking about this today? So the second thing is, and this is important, psychological capital is greater than the sum of its parts. That is absolutely crucial. So it's not just hope separate to efficacy, separate to resilience, separate to optimism. So in fact, that's what I presented it originally, but I should probably present it more looking like that. That's a more representative academic version of the model, whereby everything is interlinked. So what that means in practice is, through your journaling practice, through your interventions, through working on your well-being, if you can manage to increase your level of hope or increase your level of optimism or resilience or efficacy, what we expect to see based on the research is an increase in levels of the other components. So this is why I love this concept. It gives you bang for your buck. So if you're focusing on, I really need to work on my resilience, or I really need to work on my efficacy or my hope or whatever, we do expect to see an increase in the other levels of the other components. So that's very hopeful and very inspiring, I think, from the perspective of, as I said, bang for your buck. So the third thing, how are we doing for time? Okay. So the third thing that is really good to share around psychological capital, and I suppose why bother, is a key question that lots of people ask, is what it's linked to. So what we tend to see in a piece of research that we did actually in COVID, which was quite an interesting piece of research, we looked at people's level of psychological capital, and what we observed in that data set was psychological capital, those people who had increased levels of psychological capital also had increased levels of well-being, performance, and life satisfaction, and that's when we controlled for other factors as well. So I mean, that's what we all want, right? We all want to feel more well. We all want to perform and to be better in life and what we're doing. And we all want to be more satisfied and content ultimately. So that's really, really important. So when we focus on increasing our psychological capital, we can expect to see increased levels of well-being, performance, and life satisfaction. So a little summary slide is essentially how I visualize all this. I'm quite a visualized person. Your psychological capital is your hero, your hope, your efficacy, your resilience, and your optimism. And that, I believe you can consider, is your psychological soil. That is the soil in which you, your goals, and whatever it is that you want to do and achieve can thrive. So rather than just goal setting, we actually take a step back and focus on the soil first. Like any good gardener, we all know the conditions are absolutely perfect. The light, the water, the soil, very, very important. Okay, I had another little menti, but you know what? In the interest of time, I'm going to skip it. And it was just a very, very quick check-in. I was going to do a little measurement of your levels of hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism. If anybody really wants to do that, Dee or anybody in particular, I'm more than happy. I think it's just 4 questions, so it wouldn't take a very long time. But I don't think we need to do it. Dee's giving me a high five. Does that mean go ahead, Dee? Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
I think the interactive stuff is great. I know I'm getting a lot out of it, so I hope everyone
Brilliant.
else is. But yeah,
Great.
far away.
But
Yeah.
you know what? We'll do that then. Okay, great. So we have some answers coming in here. So we have 4 statements, and they essentially represent a quick check-in. Absolutely not an academic measurement of your psychological capital, because that is a more robust and longer psychometric scale. But this is a quick check-in for you to see, well, if I was to create a visual of my psychological capital, what might that look like? I mean, obviously what we're going for is the ultimate perfect diamond, but that's not reality. I mean, none of us have that all the time. So on any given day, it might look different, but generally we're trying to create this nicely shaped diamond. So the answer's coming in here. Okay, great. Well, there's plenty of answers there coming in. So there's 44 of you. That's great. We see resilience pretty high at the bottom. They're all pretty high, to be honest. So that's great. So it's nice for you to have a check-in and to just ask yourself those 4 questions around that. Okay, because I'm going to be moving on to an intervention that you can do on yourself, I wanted to ask you this question. So a little check-in with yourself. Do you have limiting beliefs about yourself, your abilities, about life, or about the future? And for anyone who says, I'm not sure, that's absolutely okay. Maybe it could be that, how do we define limiting beliefs? So limiting beliefs are beliefs or thoughts that we have that place limits on what we think about ourselves, feel about ourselves, think we can do, think we can achieve, and so on and so forth. But it's absolutely okay if you're not sure about that. And this is generally what I would expect to see on this slide based on the work that I do. And I will join the 38 of you, and I will make number 39 in saying, oh no, someone else is taking my spot. I'll join those of you who said, yes, I absolutely have limiting beliefs about myself. I think it's absolutely natural for us to have limiting beliefs about ourselves. So just to normalize that is something that this is kind of exactly how I would expect to see this slide play out. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so there's 2 more, so just this one and 1 more. So here's a question. This is a lovely one. So if you can quiet the voice inside and just ask yourself, what limiting beliefs have I let go of over the past year? So just kind of giving a general time frame here. Over the past year, what have I let go of? What thing did I used to think about myself? And now I've let go of it. So I suppose you're finishing the statement that I put here. I no longer believe that, okay, that I'm not enough, that I can't say no. Also, really, really honest, someone saying there, I haven't let go of any. That's absolutely okay. Hopefully today will be a catalyst. It'll be a kind of a point in this, in a line in the sand where maybe we'll start thinking about making those changes. Perfectionism, hard relate, that I'm not strong, that I don't deserve, that I'm not as good as colleagues. Oh, I think we can also relate to that. That I'm the least qualified or intelligent person in the room. Absolutely, we can relate to that. That I can change how my family will do things. Yeah, really, really honest reflection there. That someone saying they let go of fear of failure. I'm not enough, coming in again and again here. That's one of our fundamental human limiting beliefs that we see over and over again in research. Thoughts are facts. Yeah, that's something that that's so common. That I'm responsible for everything. Yeah, that we place that all on our shoulders. That I'm not as good as I can think. Oh, look, these are so honest. We could spend an hour on this question alone. This could be its own webinar because there's such honesty in it. And thank you. I also want to just take a moment to say thank you, because I'm seeing some really vulnerable ones coming in here. People say that they have let go of the thought that I'm unworthy of being loved as I am. I'm really happy to hear that you've let go of that thought and all of the thoughts on the slide here. And no doubt, for those of you who've let go of these thoughts, it took work. It took work. So that's something to be commended and something to be proud of. People pleasing, lack of confidence, can't control my mind to move quickly enough in dealing with every experiences. Yeah, these are so honest. Thank you so much for sharing these. I am going to move on just in the interest of time, but I will share just so that we can normalize these thoughts. And last question in this little Menti is, what's a limiting belief that is still holding me back? So this is quite a vulnerable question for me to ask. Only answer this if you feel comfortable and ready to answer that, if you feel that you can. Again, it's anonymous, but just check in with yourself. Do you feel ready to answer that? Okay. Fear of judgment, that I'm going to be found out. So that there we have classic line from the literature on imposter phenomenon. I'm not enough, not forgiving. Maybe I'll run out of time. Yeah. Not good enough. Judgment. Yeah. But these are so honest. Thank you so much for bringing the honesty today. Yeah. I have to say, I love the honesty and the reflection here. And it's someone I think who's done a fair bit of work. I will only deserve love once I have done X, Y, Z. So that we talk about if then in psychology. So if I do this, then I'll get that. That's really, really honest, which of course is a fallacy. So really, really honest to acknowledge that. Look how often we see I'm not good enough coming in there. Hopefully this slide will normalize that for you. Not enough knowledge to speak up, too many to rely on me, getting too old to try new things. Yeah, so but the fact that we're acknowledging that is a limiting belief means we know it's a limiting belief. We know it's not true. Need to please everyone, fear of mistakes, that I'm incapable, that I'm not a good enough daughter, sister, mother. Yeah, and look at all those hats we wear, masks we have to put on, things we have to juggle. That I can't be wrong. Yeah, we have to be perfect. Yeah, I do it all the time when I do a webinar or when I do a podcast. I'm like, I have to have the perfect answers all the time, but that's just not real. I don't have all the answers. So I totally relate to that. That I'm too old to reach a high potential in a hobby. Yeah, look at that limiting belief around age. Thank you for being honest around that. That I don't have enough time. Ooh, that's a really, really interesting one and an honest one. So you're acknowledging that it's a limiting belief. Does that mean you're saying maybe I do have enough time, but I'm using it perhaps in a way that doesn't serve me? That's an interesting one to reflect on. And I'll invite you to do that. Feeling that all mistakes are catastrophic. Yeah. So kind of that's where your mind goes when something happens. That's very, very, very true. Very true that we all experience it. Okay, I'm going to stop that there. But again, I'm going to share. Thank you guys for doing that. I know you thought you were having a little quiet webinar where you could sit back and relax. And I come out with those big questions. Play from current slide. Okay. So those questions inform where we're going to go next. Now, I'm really conscious of time. I'm happy to stay on if you are. And again, anybody who has to rush away, don't worry, I'll get the slides to you. But if Dee, if you give me a thumbs up or a high five or something, I'll continue on. Great. Even if this runs a little bit over, because I hope the intervention that I want to share with you today will help build your PsyCap every day, because every day is busy and there's just lots coming at us, as we see in that GIF, which I felt was very appropriate. Okay, so this intervention looks at stories. So what stories are you telling yourself? Now, I use the word, and I'm not the only one who uses it, I use the word stories not to minimize potential discomfort or pain around those limiting beliefs, but to acknowledge that they are not fact-based, that they are in fact stories. So what stories are you telling yourself? Now, you've already done that work. You've already told me some of those stories or limiting beliefs that you're telling yourself. And the most common ones that we see in literature are here. So these are the kind of, when I do work with clients and we get down to the bedrock, when we can't go any further. Sometimes they think it's this thought, but we dig and dig and dig and dig and dig, and we actually get deeper. I'm not good enough. I don't deserve it. I know I won't do it. I'm too XYZ, too smart, not smart enough. I'm afraid I won't be able to. I'm afraid I can't. What will others think? Really big limitation that we put on ourselves. Who do I think I am too? Which is a shame-based limiting belief. I'll never be able to XYZ, or I never, or I always. So again, those kind of jumping to those real extremes of thoughts. So these are the most common self-limiting thoughts or self-limiting beliefs that we have. So if you recognize yourself in any of those, you are absolutely not alone. And I recognize myself in them too. The key in terms of moving the dial on your psychological well-being and your psychological capital to improve that psychological soil is awareness. The minute you can put that into the spotlight and go, oh yeah, I have that thought, that could be what's doing the damage. That could be what's getting in the way. Already you've moved the dial, believe it or not. So the quick intervention, and it's absolutely not a quick intervention, so I should laugh at myself when I say that, is what you see in front of you. Now, it's both simple and difficult. It's both simple and profound. And when I do this with clients, irrespective of if it's corporate or if it's sporting, particularly high performance athletes, this changes the game. And you might have seen it before, you might have done it before. And it's simply cognitive behavioral coaching, very similar to cognitive behavioral therapy, but we're going to look at it simply from a coaching perspective today, and something you can do with somebody who works as a coaching professional, or you can do it on yourself. So I do this on myself, and I'm going to teach you how to do it today. And we're going to do a simple version of it. I acknowledge it's going to be quick, but to be honest, it's kind of the type of thing you could spend an hour on. So we're just going to learn how to do it. And again, happy for you to touch base with me if you have any questions or anything after. So cognitive behavioral coaching, this little model works like this. It's the idea that at number 1 is our thoughts, at number 2 is our feelings, and at number 3 is our actions. Now, if you want to take a piece of paper and draw a triangle in the middle of your paper and number them 1, 2, 3, and put at number 1 thoughts, put at number 2 feelings, and put at number 3 actions or behaviors, you can absolutely do that. That would be a brilliant thing to take to a journaling practice, or a brilliant intervention to do just when you want to take stock, if you feel there's something making you uncomfortable, something getting in the way for you. Let me just see what I have put in here. Okay, let's go back actually, just to stay with this a moment. So at number 1, I'd like you to think about a goal, perhaps that you'd like to achieve. And I'd like you to, I suppose I'd invite you, if you're comfortable, to think about maybe some thoughts you have around that are getting in the way. So those thoughts, I don't want to influence you, and I absolutely would not if we were working one-to-one. There would be plenty of silence where I would be asking you to sit in that silence and let those thoughts bubble up. But in the interest of time, I'm going to guide you a little bit more. Those thoughts can be everything you've already shared. So those thoughts might be, I'm never going to succeed at it. I'm too old. What will my sister-in-law think? I'm sure I won't be able to do it. I don't have enough resources. Oh, sure, I don't have enough time. So what are the thoughts that are getting in the way? So put those down at number 1. And we would spend quite a bit of time with this exercise, listing every single thought that comes into our head about this. Then in the cognitive behavioral coaching model, we'll move up to number 2. Just check the chat there. Somebody came in. No problem, Aileen. Thank you so much for saying that. Anybody who has to drop off, don't worry, you don't have to leave a message. It's totally okay. I understand that I'm running over. We move up to number 2 in this model, and then we say, well, when I think those thoughts, if I'm really honest with myself, when I think those thoughts that I'm not good enough, or that I'm not smart enough, or I'm the least intelligent person in the room, or I'll never be able to succeed, or I don't have the resources, if I'm honest with myself, when I think those things, what do I feel? And up at number 2 in that box, we list everything we feel when we think those things. Maybe you feel fed up, maybe you feel, and you don't need fancy language. So for anybody who says, oh, I don't know all the words in psychology, you don't need it. I totally allow my clients to curse here. You can say, I'll give the PC version. I feel fed up, I feel despondent, I feel unworthy, I feel hopeless, I feel like, whatever, maybe I feel fear. It can be a big one. Feel judged. So whatever you feel, put those in there. And again, list until you can't list anymore. And then we move to number 3. And again, I'm moving through this quickly. But when we move to number 3, we then ask ourselves, well, when I think those thoughts, and when I feel that, when I feel this, what does my behavior look like? What do I do? What are my actions? Well, when I feel despondent or hopeless or unworthy, or when I feel fed up, or when I feel fear of failure, my actions look like I don't take action. I procrastinate. I avoid. I don't make that phone call, or I play small, or I don't go for that promotion, or whatever it might be. So being really brutally honest with ourselves, when we feel those things as a result of thinking those things, what do we do? So at this point, when you've done this exercise, and I'm hoping that you're doing this here with me as I'm bringing you through it, and you've taken a piece of paper, you have populated box 1, box 2, and box 3. And then we move to a turnaround. So this is really, really important if you're doing cognitive behavioral coaching on yourself, that you say, okay, now let's turn it around. Bonus points if you use a different color pen, because that's my brain. I will, if I'm doing this physically with someone, I'll always change pen color, and I'll say, okay, well, let's go back to number 1 and let's now look at thoughts that serve me. So this is not about toxic positivity. This is not about trying to fool yourself, because your brain and your ego is too clever to be fooled. It's about not toxic positivity and choosing perfect, idealistic thoughts. It's about asking yourself, those thoughts don't help me. What would be a more helpful thought? Those thoughts don't serve me. What would be a more self-serving thought? And the thought might not be perfect. It might not be, I will succeed, because maybe you don't feel that. So that'll feel like a lie in your body. But maybe the thought might be, chances are I can make a go of it. Or, to be honest, most people aren't really that bothered about what I'm doing with my life. They're focused on themselves. Or a thought might be, I've done pretty well at most things I've tried in the past, so this might work. Whatever those thoughts might be. So what is a more helpful serving thought? And then you do the same thing. You move up to number 2 and you say, well, when I think those things, that I can do it, or I've succeeded before, so I can probably succeed again, and so on and so forth. How does that feel? How does that feel? And you might not be able to stretch too far with those feelings. You might say, that feels more hopeful. That feels optimistic. That feels, I feel happy. I feel lighter. I feel whatever it might be. So populate there. And then we come back to number 3 and we say, well, when I feel optimistic and hopeful, and when I feel positive, or when I feel more content, when I feel more confident, what do I do then? What are those actions? I might make that phone call. I might write a new motivation letter. I might update my CV and put and apply for that job. I might, I don't know, take more risk, whatever it might be. It really depends on the goals that you identified earlier in the session. So really what this is all about, and I'm super conscious that I've gone over time, and I'm conscious that I've tried to put so much in here, but I wanted to show you how it all links together because it's quite a big area. This is all connected. It's all about looking at how our thoughts create our feelings create behavior, our behavior reinforces thought, and we stay in that cycle. With cognitive behavioral coaching and this model, this very, very simple model that I use with, all sorts of clients, it's about interrupting the pattern and the cycle that we can stay in, where we can stay in a loop that doesn't serve us. Okay. Another way to do it, I'm just going to skip through this, is distancing language. So that's about really saying, not saying, I am sad, but you might say, I'm feeling sad. That is actually a step back from the feeling. So you're separating yourself from the thought and yourself from the feeling. So you say things like, I notice that I'm feeling. The story that I'm telling myself is that I'm not good enough. So instead of saying I'm not good enough, now we start to say, well, I notice that I'm telling myself I'm not good enough. Or the story that I'm telling myself is that I'm not good enough. Or the narrative that my ego is telling me is that I'm not good enough. Distancing language, these are very simple phrases that are on this slide, can be game changing. I was going to say life changing, but that sounds too dramatic. The reality is it can absolutely change the game, because you're separating yourself from the thoughts and the feelings. So that's the question that I suppose I leave you with, is what are the thoughts that you're going to choose? So I suppose in summary, to wrap up here with a few kind of closing slides, this is really about looking back, a little bit of reflecting, looking in, some introspection, and looking forward, creating those goals, all in the context of that psychological soil, with a view to creating your best possible self. Now, I'm conscious that this phrase makes people allergic, but actually it's a term that we have in positive psychology, and it is a very robust term. So I have created a document. I'm going to send it on to Dee and make sure that that's given out to everybody. And it's an intervention that you can do. You can do it over a course of a week, whatever you want. You can kind of slice and dice it whatever way works for you and your lifestyle. It is a beautiful intervention that you can do that can help you, I suppose, identify, what does my best self look like? Some of you acknowledged, I don't know what that version of myself or that vision for myself looks like. That's okay. Zero judgment in this space. But here's an intervention that can help you identify what that looks like. And if that's that one step today, well, let this be it. I did this a number of years ago in a webinar. And somebody asked me to record it. So I did record it and I put it on YouTube. I am not a YouTuber. I have a couple of meditations on there. So it's recorded as a meditation if you want to listen to it, because I appreciate that we, with our neurodiversity, we all have different brains and different ways of, I suppose, taking in information. So I have the audio version, and I'll give you a physical version if you want to do the written version, to do your best possible self-intervention. So a couple of quotes to leave you with. I love this little one and this visual, this idea that closing your eyes and imagining your best possible version of who you are, that's who you really are. So when you do that intervention, you will see this version of yourself, and that's who you really are. And it's about closing the gap between, I suppose, where you are now and where you want to be. But I will, I suppose, leave with a disclaimer that it can be, there's so much pressure and we've already spinning so many plates. We're already wearing so many hats. So not to put your pressure on yourself to be your best possible self all the time. That's just not reality. Let's call a spade a spade. And so as a kind of a closing remark, I want to leave you with a quote that is probably one of my favorite passages from a book. It's from the book called The Inner Game of Tennis by Tim Galloway. And it's not a book about tennis. He's just a tennis coach who writes about mental states. And this passage, I read it, I don't know, every couple of months I'll read this passage. It just really speaks to me, and I'd love to leave you with that today if I can, because I'm already way over time. So I'm going to read it to you. When we plant a rose seed in the earth, we notice that it is small, but we do not criticize it as rootless and stemless. We treat it as a seed giving it the water and nourishment required of a seed. When it first shoots up out of the earth, we don't condemn it as immature and underdeveloped, nor do we criticize the buds for not being open when they appear. We stand in wonder at the process taking place, and we give the plant the care it needs at each stage of its development. The rose is a rose from the time it is a seed until the time it dies. Within it, at all times, it contains its whole potential. It seems to be constantly in a process of change, yet at each state, at each moment, it is perfectly all right as it is. So I wanted to leave on that note because I did mention goals and I did mention change and I did mention limiting beliefs quite a bit in this session. And so for me, I want to preface, or I want to not preface, I want to finish by saying we can do all of that, but the most important thing in all of that is actually compassion. And that's what I wanted to leave you with today, because I think there's just so much work on for us to do, and compassion is really, really important in all of that work. So super sorry for going so much over time. And thank you for those of you who stayed with me. I will absolutely make sure that you get slide deck, that you'll get the intervention that I've prepared for you as a PDF. I'll get the Menti documents for anyone who's interested. So I'm going to send all that to Dee and make sure you all get it soon. So thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for staying, and apologies again for going over time. You gave up your lunch break and I took it.
Listen, I just wanted to jump on super quickly and say, Jen, thank you so much. My goodness, I've learned so much myself. I know that the chat is flooded now with fantastic responses and feedback, and really something different there. And actually, I think what's very interesting is the great minds of all of these accountants that go through the grueling training and all the rest of it. And they're being so honest and saying that they don't
Yep.
feel they're good enough. So I think that's really, really interesting. And we do definitely want to commend the honesty and the vulnerability of our attendees today. Damien, thank you again so much for coming along and sitting through that. I'm sure you got something out of it as well. A really amazing session, Jen. Absolutely hats off to you. And I know we'll be seeing you again back in the Institute. And I hope that everybody engages with the material when they get it and sends it on, and people engage with you on LinkedIn or wherever they can find you. So be sure to, we'll send on the details of where people can find you, Jen, and have those engagements as well, because I think there's a lot more to be done. You're just kind of scratched the surface here. And I know that people will be very interested to find out more and do more work on themselves and obviously spread the word. So thank you, both of you, Damien, Chris behind the scenes, thank you so much. And thank you everyone that's stayed on this long to hear, you know,
apologies.
Yeah, no, not at all. We asked you to do the extra bit along the way, and they were really worth it actually, and quite you know, emotional and evoking for a lot of people. So I think we've had that feedback in the chat as well. So go and grab your lunch, guys, and we'll see you again the next time. Thanks everybody. Take care.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.